Right, so this is a picture I took of some little fir pieces from a fir tree. I arranged them on a rough grid of 3x3, which is going to help when I import it into ArtRage, because this is what I want to do. I want to create a brush that has some variation, some random variation, some kind of tree brush thing. So I just tweaked it a little bit in Picasa, just increased the contrast so these things stand out a little bit better. So now I'm going to import this image and then try and cut things out and try and just tidy it all up a little bit. So let's turn the grid on. And then I can arrange them, which I will do at some point in the future. So what I need to do first is I need to try and remove that background. I need to try and make that background transparent. At the moment it's all white, of course. And I deliberately took the picture and laid it out on some uniform colour, which I thought was going to be significantly different from these little fir pieces. So I've just selected the select tool and I've just tried to grab the background. So there you can see it's grabbed as much as it can and just cut that out and see what I have. Just here I am just putting a colour on the lower layer so I can see what comes through, because from an initial look here it's difficult to know how much I actually cut out of the background, but now you can see, because I would expect if I cut everything out of the background then we would have a clear red coming through, but it's not quite uniform yet, so that gives me a good indication there's a bit more work to do to be able to get into a state to be able to cut these fir pieces. So I'm going to just keep cutting. So this is just applying the magic wand again on the select tool and just cutting. And now I've got that red background, I'll have a clearer idea of how I'm getting on with this. Still not perfect, a little bit better than it was. I have a feeling what I'll need to do is I might need to use the eraser to actually cut out some of the bits in the middle. So this is what I'm doing here, as you can see. Sped it up a little bit, so it took a bit of time. So I can't go right into the detail of all these ferns at the moment. Some of them are quite complicated, but I'm just getting a rough idea. I'm just clipping off the main background at the moment. Right, now I'm in a position that I can start to cut these things out. So as you can see, I'm cutting and just pasting, which automatically creates a new layer. So once I've done that, I'll be able to have individual control. So I can then easily position them on a 3x3 grid. So here we go, just going through, transforming each layer and just moving it in. Sometimes I need to resize some of them to get them to be roughly uniform. Looks alright. The red's coming through okay. Just turn that one off so I've got the transparency there. That's probably not too bad. There's still a little bit of stuff around the edges of them, but I'm not too bothered about that. So I'm going to export it to a PNG so I can save the transparency. Then I'm going to create a new sticker. So just working out what category I want it to go in. Branches, maybe, possibly. Yeah, why not? Seems like a good idea. They kind of look like branches. So let's just import the PNG. and then set my grid up, which is 3x3. So as you can see, it's drawing the 3x3 grid around them, which I'll know will be perfectly aligned because I set my grid when I was setting these things up. Right, I think that's good enough. So that now saves it into my sticker library, which is the first step on the way to creating a brush. Right, now let's create a new painting so that I can start experimenting with my new brush. Just any size will do, really. I think I need to turn the grid off. Right, the way I typically do this is I select the sticker spray and then a previous setting, whatever it might be, a previous brush, which is that, as you can see, and then I can just select the PNG I've just imported in branches, which I've named there, and then see what it initially looks like. There you go, it looks like ants. So now I can start playing around with stuff. Obviously one easy way is just to change the size of the brush. You get some kind of different effect. That just looks like a whole load of ferns on top of each other. So there's already some kind of default brush setting that seems to work alright. But now I'm going to select the variation setting. I mean, that's not that bad. Just playing around with the colours a little bit, because even though I didn't save them as a red colour, which is usually what you would do if you were going to tie the colour selection to the colour of your brush, it still has an effect. It still has a slight effect on the colour, which can be useful. So I'm just playing around with the colours a little bit. Right, let's play around with some settings. So setting it default to image brush, I thought, so that just is a straightforward stream coming out. That's basically a basic method for creating a standard brush. I mean, that looks alright. As you can see, the little bits that I didn't quite clip off around the edges are kind of coming through a little bit there. So there's not quite a clean definition of each individual brush bit. But that's not too bad. I'm not too unhappy with that because it almost gives like a snow-like effect. You almost have like snow on the outsides of these things. And therefore I'm just playing with perspective there because I've got the pen pressure tied to the scale. As you can see, it's halfway set in the spray variation. I'm getting a sense of perspective on maybe a forest by just changing the pressure of the brush. So pressing down a little bit harder in the middle brings almost those almost trees coming forward, because this is what I kind of thought they would look a bit like trees. And as you can see there, it's more pronounced, the kind of the edges I haven't quite trimmed off. But I just couldn't be bothered to do it, really. And I don't mind the effect of it. Just seeing how it looks zoomed in. Looks okay. That would be maybe a forest scene in the background, maybe that you could trim a little bit after you've done that. So I'm just playing around with colours, just seeing what different effects I can get. I think I'm fairly happy with this because it will give me some kind of forest scene. So now I've got all that packed in there, just take a little snapshot to give a front view of my brush. Usually always turn the size off. I don't really want the size ever stored. And then just selecting the category I want to save it in. Yeah, maybe foliage. Save that one away. May come in useful at some stage in the future. Maybe even not just creating a forest, possibly a texture type brush might work quite well.